Now available from National Geographic Home Video.
In Yellowstone National Park, the call of the coyote has been heard for thousands of years. A plaintive wail that echoes across the rugged landscape. Even here, this cunning predator faces a life full of threats and hardship, surviving the brutal winters, a fierce battle for dominance, and the never-ending struggle for food. Journey with us as we follow a coyote on the prowl in National Geographic's Yellowstone, Realm of the Coyote.
National Geographic Television invites you to venture into a rare and extraordinary experience. A delta in the desert. A river that never finds the sea. A sometimes water world that challenges predator and prey alike. For those who can survive, it is a place like no other. The beautiful Okavango, Africa's wild oasis.
Stay tuned after the program for Freeze Frame, an Arctic adventure, a behind-the-scenes look at the making of Arctic Kingdom. And now, our feature presentation.
In the far northern reaches of planet Earth lies an alien sea of ice. Its waves frozen in time, in darkness, in uncompromising cold. It's winter on the Arctic Ocean. But a great power is returning to conquer this frozen sea. The sun's rays touch the ice, and like a living thing, it responds. As the ice surrenders to the rising sun, it becomes a world in motion, full of danger and drama. Where creatures are trapped between moving sheets, stranded on the frozen waters, caught in the struggle to live in one of the harshest places on Earth. And where the ice meets the open sea, the sun awakens a world of strange and glorious life. This is the Arctic under the sun, a short, brilliant season of survival, a miracle and a resurrection, at the edge of the ice. After 3 months of winter's hard darkness, the first light of spring spreads a glow across the ice. It's dawn in the Arctic, in the season of eternal sun. A lone predator stalks the ice in the early light. A polar bear is on the prowl, indifferent to the killing cold. Even in temperatures of 50 below, he doesn't hibernate. The bear is the supreme master of winter on the ice. He can grow to 1,700 pounds of hunting power, but his life depends on one creature. The ringed seal takes a quick breath and returns to his world below the ice. He too has endured all winter, just beneath the feet of his mortal enemy. It's April. A female is also on the ice, bringing her cubs out hunting for the first time. They were born 4 long months ago, and since then, their mothers had nothing to eat. Her sense of smell is so keen that she can detect her prey through several feet of snow and half a mile away. She seeks out ridges where drifting snow covers the breathing hole of a ring seal. Inside this protective snow cap, a seal has dug a lair. She catches his scent. The seal rests, but only sleeps a few seconds at a time, its sharp hearing tuned to danger. A tense contest of the senses begins. Even the top predator on the ice misses 19 times out of 20. And yet the mother bear will need to kill at least 2 seals a week to keep her cubs alive. The seal is safe for the moment, but each new trip to the surface to breathe could end in another ambush. It's an oversized game of cat and mouse. The bear eats mostly the blubber, licking bits of fat from the snow. A stealthy white shadow has been following the bear. An Arctic fox. For days he's been tracking the great hunter, crossing miles of ice in hopes of leftovers from a kill. When hunting is good, the bear leaves a feast behind. The fox finds a morsel and buries it. a precaution against an unpredictable future. The sun now skims the horizon and will not set again for 4 months. Day by day, it begins to take control of the ice in the seasonal tug-of-war between darkness and light. But for nearly half the year, the far north is angled away from the sun and sleeps in the dark shadow of winter. Left in the deep freeze of space, the Arctic seas lie covered with 6 million square miles of ice. As the year progresses, the planet swings around the sun. Light returns to the top of the world. With 24-hour sunshine, the polar ice begins to retreat. By spring, the ice edge has receded to a tangle of islands in the high Canadian Arctic and to the entrance of Lancaster Sound. An icebreaker cuts the first breach of the year through 6 feet of solid ice. It brings goods to and from villages and mining outposts 500 miles north of the Arctic Circle. For the ship, the ice is an obstacle. For some, it is home. The Inuit have carved life from this place for 4,000 years. The ice is their world, and spring promises a rich season of hunting ahead. The ice itself has been guarding a secret world. But now the crystal fortress begins to crack, its walls pierced by light. In the shallows 40 feet below, the sun reveals a garden of unexpected color. Golden sea anemones, bright orange starfish, and small crustaceans awaken from a winter trance. Overhead, the skylight of ice glows green with life. A vast pasture of algae now blooms on its surface, spreading across the sea for hundreds of miles. Countless young fish and shrimp-like creatures come here to graze. These, in turn, become food for staggering numbers of Arctic cod. Protected by the shield of ice, some 500,000 tons of cod flourish in Lancaster Sound. All this abundance is solar-powered. As light floods the water, it sets off an explosion of life. Great stores of food can now be reached where the ice meets open water. It's May, and animals begin to gather for this annual feast of spring. Thick-billed murres fly in from the North Atlantic to plunder the cold waters for cod. They flock to Lancaster Sound in the hundreds of thousands. Murres are uncertain aviators. Their true medium is water. Once beneath the waves, they're the Arctic version of a penguin. With short, flipper-like wings, they dive nearly 300 feet for 3 minutes at a time. On the way back up, air trapped in their feathers expands. They rocket to the surface in a jet trail of bubbles. At the ice edge nearby, a polar bear sensed the shifting wind. As though navigating by satellite, he continues to hunt across the same range, even as the ice turns into ocean. Beneath his fur, the white bear has jet black skin to absorb the heat from the sun when he's on the surface. In the near-freezing water, 4 inches of blubber keep him warm and afloat. He's not above taking a bird or two, but the Murs take no notice and prepare to leave, for they have an urgent appointment to keep. Timing is everything here, and the schedule is set by the sun. The Murs head for land. The short breeding season has begun, and for those who come late, there'll be no second chance. Their destination is a lonely outpost in Lancaster Sound, the towering cliffs of Prince Leopold Island. Half a million seabirds crowd onto these rocky ledges, 1,000 feet above the sea. The Murs alone number almost 200,000. Vicious fighting breaks out as the Murs battle for the safest nest sites. They lay only a single egg, pear-shaped, to prevent it from rolling off the narrow rock shelf. The stronger, more aggressive birds win sites midway down the cliff, leaving the weaker birds at the top, where they're most vulnerable. An Arctic fox has been stranded here as the ice retreated from the island. His white winter fur has been replaced by a sleek brown coat. A castaway for the summer, he hunts alone on an island of birds. He heads for the cliff, the only place to find food on the island. faced with a dangerous thief, the birds abandon their eggs. And though they can lay another, a late-season chick will not survive. The fox steals all the eggs he can reach, but he'll need dozens each week to stay alive. Some he stashes in the cold ground. There will be lean days ahead. It's June. 100 miles from the island, a fleet of white whales has arrived at the ice edge. Belugas hunting for cod. The sea is suddenly alive with sound. This chirping white chorus emerges from feeding grounds beneath the frozen sea, like a gathering of polar ghosts. With no dorsal fin to impede their icy travels, these are true Arctic whales. The beluga's rich symphony of sounds hints at the complexity of their lives. Their sonar may be the most sophisticated of any whale. Navigating under miles of ice, they bounce clicks off shifting flows, using a kind of sound imaging to master their world. Their melodies pulse from their rounded foreheads, the frequencies fine-tuned like a focused beam of light piercing the blue depths. The bonds between them are strong. A mother and calf will swim side by side for 3 years. Shadowy gray at birth, they only gradually turn as perfectly white as the surrounding ice. The sun is riding high now. Strong winds from the open sea unleash their power against the ice. Beaten by wind and wave, weakened by sun and current, the ice fractures and begins to split apart. Immense cracks open behind the leading edge of the ice. These leads extend for miles, opening up new feeding areas and hunting grounds. The Inuit are experts at navigating the tricky ice fields of spring. It's a skill born of necessity, of the ancient need to hunt on this ever-changing surface. Olayoke knows how to read the ice. Still, men and machines are sometimes lost. In the old days, entire hunting parties could disappear without a trace. They are now 60 miles from home. They are hoping the trip will end in a successful hunt, but it may take days. Not far away, one of the most aggressive animals in the Arctic hauls out to rest. Adult walruses, heavily armored with tusks and skin that is 1 inch thick. Their skulls are massive and backed by a body weighing 1 ton. They can bash through 9 inches of ice. Out of the water, their only enemies are polar bears and human hunters. The walrus feed on vast beds of clams, buried 200 feet below in the muddy sea floor. Each one can eat thousands of clams in a single meal. And the mud harbors less obvious, but just as deadly predators. A carnivorous snail begins a slow, methodical attack. It smells the clam hiding in the mud and tries to penetrate the tightly closed shell. But the clam can defend itself with a strong kick from its single foot. Even stranger creatures patrol the dark ooze. They thrive in the near-freezing waters of the Arctic, feeding on the remains of the dead and on each other. Overhead, the surface is warming up. Frozen salt water melts first, and from deep inside the ice, salty brine begins to drain away. Plumes of supercool, salty liquid spill downward out of holes in the ice, freezing the waters just beneath. Hollow stalactites build up around the draining brine, some reaching 3 feet in length. The waves continue to hammer at the ice, and the edge gives way under the relentless assault. Wind and strong currents push ice floes together. Massive blocks pile up and over each other, building miniature mountain ranges. In the wake of the shifting ice, giants come to feed. The bowhead whale is named for its great curving jaw, a favorite target of whalers. It has never recovered from 2 centuries of slaughter. Numbering only in the hundreds, bowheads in the eastern Arctic make their last stand. Reaching 60 feet in length, it's the largest animal in the Arctic seas, yet the bowhead comes to feed on the smallest. Energized by the touch of the sun, the depths now pulse with millions of minute animals. They seem electrified. Their transparent bodies glimmer with iridescent light. More liquid than solid, these delicate drifters are miracles of survival, wrapped in enchanting beauty. But to live here, they must also kill. A jelly trails its long tentacles, snaring a copepod, then reeling it in to its death. These tiny hunters float in a world of their own, unaware of the leviathan that could devour their entire universe. The bowhead sweeps through the water like a living trawl net. Between the cavernous jaws, dark sheets called baleen filter the water, collecting thousands of small creatures. Its enormous white tongue will scrape the baleen clean, harvesting the sea, one giant mouthful at a time. The sun is winning control of the ice, and the surface pools with meltwater. Temperatures now reach a balmy 40 degrees. Dripping water measures the fleeting season, the sound of summer ticking away. Fresh leads break into the remaining ice. The Arctic's most intriguing creature moves in from the sea. The narwhal, with its ivory tusk, a living tooth up to 10 feet long. The whales converge along the narrow highway. This is what Olayuk has been looking for. Hunting is at the heart of the Inuit culture, a way of life and skill still passed down from father to son. It's a proud link to the past and the only way to live off the land in the Arctic. Today, the Inuit are still allowed to hunt whales, but their take is strictly controlled. Yet Olayuk remembers the not-so-distant days when hunting meant the difference between life and death. They've landed a female. Only males have a tusk. Whale skin is especially nutritious, high in vitamin C. Without such a diet, the Inuit would have suffered from the scurvy which plagued many Arctic expeditions. Eaten raw, it's a delicacy called muktuk. In the still twilight of midnight, the narwhals joust, a slow, stately ritual of mythic beasts. The purpose of their strange single tusk remains a mystery. Like the peacock's tail and the lion's mane, it may serve as a banner of male prowess. It could be a weapon, but it's the stuff of legend. In the Middle Ages, the tusks were sold as unicorn horns for 10 times their weight in gold. The sea ice is flooded now. Although beneath the water, the ice is still several feet thick. Out on the melting surface, an abandoned ring seal has lost her bearings. She has wandered away from her breathing hole and cannot find her way back. Now she's trapped above the ice, an easy target for a hungry polar bear. And if she cannot return to the sea beneath her, she will starve. The young seal is now exhausted, but luck finally leads her to a hole in the ice. She is safe, but now she's in unknown territory, a long way from her familiar network of breathing holes. She won't stray far for a while. All around her, the ice is changing. The pasture of algae that once blanketed the surface has sloughed off and joined together in flowing ribbons of green. Long tendrils reach out to absorb light and nutrients from the passing currents. A new lead is opened in the ice, and a pod of narwhals comes streaming into the crack. They usually travel in small numbers, but when fishing is good, hundreds may come together. As they enter the crack, these specialized hunters take a risk. The opening unlocks a rich store of Arctic cod, but the ice is still shifting. Without warning, the lead closes off. The whales are trapped. The entire pod must surface to breathe in this small pool of open water. They bob up and down in a crush of bodies, careful not to wound each other with their tusks. If the hole closes over completely, the narwhals will have to make a run for open water. If they don't find it, they will suffocate and die. Then, suddenly, as unpredictably as it closed, the lead reopens. And the whales are free. High off the cliffs of Prince Leopold Island, fulmars and kittiwakes ride the wild winds. Even gusts of 40 miles per hour present no problem for these aerial acrobats. Landing is the tricky part. There's new life in the Moor colony. The adult birds are busy plying back and forth to the sea, returning with cod for their young. The chick will need to triple its weight over the next 3 weeks and feeds round the clock in the constant daylight. At the top of the cliff, glaucous gull chicks are hungry too. But gulls don't limit their diet to fish. This one goes hunting closer to home, looking for an unprotected chick. Returns with a grisly catch. For the fox, these are hungry times. Egg-laying is over and the chicks have hatched out of his reach. He has only his store of buried eggs to see him through. High summer finally reaches the Arctic. The last remnants of ice swirl near the shores of Lancaster Sound. The frozen sea is broken at last, drifting in tattered pieces on the current. Moving inshore are the gleaming white shapes of belugas. They return by the hundreds to the same inlets they frequent each year. Their smooth, white skin has turned yellow and wrinkled. It's time to molt. On the rocky bottom of the shallows, the whales scrape off their old, weathered skin with a rejuvenating rub. Terns wheel overhead and dive for bits of molded skin. As the tide turns, the whales retreat into deeper water. But one young beluga has pushed too far inshore. The benevolent sun now becomes his greatest enemy. He could easily sunburn, and out of the cold water, he could overheat. The others can do nothing. The rocks have cut his sensitive skin. All he can do is wait for the incoming tide. With one last surge, the young beluga recovers his freedom. It's only August, but autumn is closing in on the Murr colony. The chicks are just 3 weeks old, still unable to fly. Yet the time has come to leave the island. Escorted by its father, the chick makes its way through a gauntlet of hostile adults still defending their ledges. Driven by irresistible instinct, the chick prepares to make an incredible leap from the 1,000-foot cliff. With his father close behind, he plummets to the waters below. For the next 8 weeks, they'll drift southward as the young moors grow the feathers they'll need to finally take to the air. The fox is left alone. His stash of eggs is gone, and he may starve before he can escape the island. The moon now looks down on Lancaster Sound, the cold, pale face of the coming winter. All across the Arctic, animals are on the move, fleeing the coming freeze. The cold is returning to claim these seas. The great bowheads depart as their food supply begins to dwindle in the fading light. Slowly, the surface begins to transform. Crystals congeal into grease ice, then thicken into pancake ice. The season of the sun is over. Soon, winter and the white bear will stalk the ice once more. Cold howls across the empty expanse of frozen sea. Darkness deepens. The bear settles in to stay. And the Arctic turns once more toward the dark night of space.
Working in the Arctic is as close to working on another planet as I could imagine.
It was a psychological hardship at times because of the isolation, because of the fact that there was nowhere else to go.
582. The thing that the Arctic teaches you instantly is that you have no control. Everything is different up there, and you're really a babe in the woods when you first get there, except that there are no woods.
This is Canada's Lancaster Sound, 500 miles north of the Arctic Circle. It's one of the harshest places on Earth. But as the summer sun moves north and touches the frozen sea, this perilous world plays host to some of Earth's most elusive animals. And to capture them on film means going right to the edge. Into this daunting wilderness came National Geographic's Lisa Truitt to film one of nature's most dramatic stories.
Everywhere I work is risky, but the Arctic is more risky than most. It's a more powerful place than most. It's more unpredictable. So I knew there was always a chance that the best laid plans could go completely awry and we could come back sort of empty-handed. So for this film, I needed the best crew in the business, people you could count on when you couldn't count on the Arctic.
Renowned wildlife cameraman Neil Reddig couldn't wait to get there. But for someone whose reputation was made in tropical rainforests, the frozen north was a new form of torture.
The weather conditions were the thing that made it difficult, the cold, the blowing snow, and the danger at times, mainly the breakup of the ice.
As for Chris West, despite a career of recording sound in unlikely places, he soon found he'd been no place quite like the Arctic.
But the more I was on the ice, the more I learnt that this is not all fun. This is a very dangerous environment to be in.
Yet for underwater specialist Doug Allen, going to the Arctic was almost like coming home.
Maybe it's having done a lot of diving in the cold over the years. I kind of get to thinking that cold is mostly psychological.
Why they're all in one piece?
In polar expeditions, cutting corners can cost lives. And so on top of the film gear, you have to bring everything else you need to survive. Food, shelter, fuel, and transportation.
Okay, wait!
I'd never even seen a skidoo before. I arrived there and they say, "Oh, there's your skidoo." And I say, "Oh yeah? How do you start the thing?"
The animals are at the edge, far out across the ice. To get there, the crew will have to traverse the only surface that shields them from the frigid sea. Miles of ridges, cracks, and frozen plain.
Cameras, the sound recording equipment was put through an unbelievable amount of punishment. You'd rattle your bones. We're flying along at a fairly high speed over rough ice, and you can look back and see all your gear. It's just pounding, bam, 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 bam.
It never gets dark during the seasons that we were there. And there's no ground beneath your feet, it's ice, it's frozen ocean, which is moving and breaking while you're living on it.
For the crew, no day is ever without its struggles and strains.
Camping in the Arctic is very rustic. You have to have as little with you as you possibly need to survive because you are constantly having to move camp at a moment's notice. So we had no luxuries like bathrooms.
Slaved all day over a hot stove.
You might want to go to the toilet, and it's an effort. You don't want to go because you get out there and it's blowing a gale and it's snow, and you've got to take your clothes off, and you really hate it.
High-tech stuff here. Ice, got iced coffee.
One day blends into the night, which blends into the next day, and you really lose all sense of time. You eat when you're hungry and when you're not filming. You sleep when there's nothing to film. You really, everything you do is dictated by the Arctic.
But for a film crew, staying at ground level often limits the view. So they decided to go up in an ultralight aircraft. Even on bright summer days, one gust of wind could blow it out of the sky.
One more time real quick. Tell me if it's going. I think some of the most exciting times, even though I gotta admit I wasn't always comfortable, were the times I was up in the ultralight. I mean, it was a real kind of a rush. I mean, Glenn was quite a good pilot. We were usually going up with the plane loaded to the max if we were filming. And I can just remember the kind of anxious times when the plane is careening down the ice, and he would sort of tweak it just at the right moment when the skis hit a bump, and it would kind of vault us into the air. There's no one else around for hundreds and hundreds of miles. You know, it's just absolutely strange feeling and almost primeval. You're experiencing something that hasn't changed by the hand of man at all.
Arctic life is in delicate balance, all time for a springtime bloom. As the sun warms the air, the frozen seas begin to break up, and that starts a rush to polar feeding grounds. For a few weeks each year, these waters are food-rich lanes on a migratory highway. Moving steadily northward until halted by unbroken ice, even the massive bowhead whale comes in search of food. Beneath the ice cover lies a seasonal bounty. Probing these bone-chilling depths was Doug Allen's job.
And suddenly, from all this sort of crazy maelstrom of sound and snow up above, you suddenly go into this completely peaceful, weightless world. So it's like kind of slipping into a darkened room, if you will.
Tropical colors and remarkable life forms thrive in the cold Arctic waters.
So that you have this feeling of immense distance and space underneath the ice. And everything is just different shades of blue.
Where ice meets open sea is the best place to find marine mammals. And Doug hit the jackpot when the belugas arrived.
Long before you see a beluga, you'll hear groups of them chirruping away in the distance and screeching to each other. They were like, you know, these bodybuilder guys that get themselves all puffed up and ripped up just to do their display. They looked absolutely stunning. They were just pure muscle.
For Doug, it was a productive dive. But topside, conditions had changed. The ice was starting to move. Tremendous forces were at work on the ice edge, cracking and splitting it apart. The Inuit guides, drawing on generations of know-how, watched closely for signs of impending trouble. Caught on the wrong side of a growing fracture, the camp was in danger of drifting off to sea. And when it started to happen, Neil, Chris, and Lisa were out filming several miles away.
It was a really good day because we'd done a nice sequence before that, and this was getting a real bonus day. And all of a sudden, there's all the Inuits going that way very fast on their skis, and we thought, well, where were they going in a hurry, you know?
We started heading back to camp and realized that a gigantic piece of ice that our camp is on its way out to sea, and we're a long way from it.
I reckon another 5 minutes and we would have been stranded.
In danger of being set adrift, they had minutes to break camp and make a run for safer ice.
The danger is that when a slab of ice the size of Cleveland starts floating away, you can't feel it. And if the Inuit hadn't told us what was happening, we wouldn't have known until it was too late.
Facing an ever-widening crack with only minutes to spare, the Inuit towed crew and gear across to safety on makeshift rafts of ice.
Sure, we could have probably been airlifted off, but they have a policy that you leave your gear and your snowmobiles, and they just take the humans. So, well, we made it all right.
For the crew, it had been a sort of initiation, the polar version of trial by fire. Now there was little to do but sit out the bad weather.
Okay. Go and find Lisa. Not much filming going to be done today, old chap.
There's absolutely nowhere to go. It's just white. You know, you're in your tent or you're out of your tent. And if you're out of your tent, you're not comfortable. The thing that really was most difficult for me, I think, was not being able to really take a decent shower, you know, and kind of living with yourself being dirty all the time.
Uncleanliness because of the lack of showers. That's, you tend to start getting a little bit sick of being dirty.
I have a little setback. It started raining in the middle of the night. And the snow is better than rain, but even though we've got everything packed in watertight things, still everything's getting wet, and it's going to take a long time to sort our gear out after this. I could feel the crew getting frustrated because they were up there to work and we weren't able to work.
It was almost like the stretch of bad weather would just go almost to set you over the edge, you know, spirit-wise. Then all of a sudden you get a nice day, and it recharged your batteries, and you'd be raring to go again, you know. And that's what kept us going. That once in a while good day in the run of bad weather.
With the Arctic again at its pristine best, the legendary narwhals appeared. Despite their sword-like tusks, these swift, deep-diving whales are among the shyest creatures in polar seas.
I think West wore one pair of underwear for 4 weeks.
Three.
We're running out of water.
Okay.
How do I look?
After the first cleanup in weeks, they could finally get back to work. An Arctic summer is fleeting, and they'd only filmed a small part of what they'd come here to get. Seabirds ply these waters in great numbers. And when thick-billed murres arrived, Doug rigged a remote underwater camera to capture their dives on tape.
The murres take these incredible dives, up to 3 minutes and 300 feet deep, to catch fish. They're like the penguins of the Arctic. So we just positioned the camera where they were diving, and then we could sit back and watch the action on a monitor nearby.
But the murres are here for more than food. They head to a lonely island in the middle of Lancaster Sound, where they nest and breed by the hundreds of thousands.
I don't know, we're going over the edge again.
With only weeks to go before a short summer's end, Neil and Chris followed them to Prince Leopold Island. A bleak, desolate place of steep cliffs and ledges where Arctic weather is often at its worst. Famous for its piercing winds and brutal storms, landing on Prince Leopold is treacherous. And though the surface looks smooth, it's all sharp stone and flaking rock, and a tough place to camp.
In hindsight, I think we could have picked a better, more sheltered spot, but when they just drop you with 2 ton of gear, I mean, it's very hard to move that anywhere else. So you tend to say, oh, this is a good spot for a village.
It was incredibly bleak. I mean, the cliff just falls away, 1,000 feet straight down.
Each side of this is about 1,000 foot straight out of the water. So you've got to be very careful as you go down.
We had a couple of days of good weather when we first arrived.
The first 2 days were really pleasant, to the point where we thought, wow, this is going to be really a piece of cake. You know, it's going to be ideal for filming and everything. And then it just went downhill after that.
Held captive in their tents by high winds, freezing rain, and snow, it was a psychological test as tough as any they'd known.
I'm glad the wind's died down a bit today. It's only blowing 50 knots at the moment. At least it's not raining. Could be worse. Right, who said it doesn't rain in the Arctic? Who says it doesn't rain in the Arctic?
You have to have some sort of reading material or something. Otherwise, you just sit there and dwell and dwell, you know.
Yeah, I've had the day off today because I'm not feeling very well. I was cold. So I've been very useful. I've tidied up the tent here. It's very nice and pretty. And I made this little thing here, see, days to release it. Working on, we're going on the 23rd, you see, of August. And so it's the 2nd of August, so there's 2 days gone already. So we've got 2 days, so we've got 21 days left.
And we had a little calendar that we were crossing off, to the point where we were actually crossing half days off by putting the line halfway through the number.
And I got annoyed with you one day because any time I got annoyed with you because you jumped ahead one day.
That's
and,
right.
And it was my job to cross off the number, not yours.
Yeah.
12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 20, 21, 22. That's not right. You sure you didn't cross that off today?
Yeah, positive.
I don't trust you.
Beleaguered by the worst summer storms in years, Chris and Neil were going stir-crazy, Arctic style.
All the eggs have fallen off the cliff. All the eggs have fallen off the cliff. All of them.
And that's about all we've done on the weather at the moment, apart from it's about 5 degrees over.
Hello, traffic.
No traffic, but I think Lisa's going to contact us at 8 o'clock or 2000 hours. Over.
Miles to the south, Lisa and Doug set up shop on Somerset Island.
Hey, there you go. How you doing? Hey there, what's happening?
Figured this out.
With luck, belugas were on the way.
We built a tower in an inlet where the belugas come every summer. They're there to molt, and they literally swim right into the shallows to rub their old skin off on the rocks.
To catch them molting, Doug had to sit in the tower stranded by high tide for 6 or 7 hours at a stretch. It was cold and cramped, but the payoff was spectacular.
This summer, 900 belugas swam right under Doug's nose. There were males and cows with their calves. It was unbelievable.
Good fortune reached Prince Leopold, too. For a moment, the Arctic relaxed its grip. The island's precarious ledges were now alive with families of murres, but filming them required imagination and guts.
The height of the cliff was a big problem. It's because it was dangerous, and the makeup of the cliff is it's very crumbly. You can't climb it at all.
The wind literally would buffet you, and it threatened to actually blow you right off the cliff. And of course, you're not going to survive falling 1,000 feet. So we're talking about this 200-pound apparatus that we had to set up right on the edge of the cliff with these rocks that are flaking away. And to get the shot, we wanted to actually sweep the camera out with a wide-angle lens to sort of give you a bird's eye view of what it looked like to look straight down.
I was completely amazed by the abundance in wildlife up there, not just the bird life, but the animals in the land, the Arctic hare, foxes. I mean, I just didn't expect that much up there, how animals can survive on just snow and such long seasons of darkness.
In the waning days of an Arctic summer, they were rewarded with extraordinary scenes, including a lone Arctic fox hunting a cliffside meal.
I think by the time the shoot was over, I was ready to go. I was ready to go home.
Right, but the plane came and we loaded it up, and he had to do 2 trips. And he said, "I can only take one person the first flight." And I said, "That'll be."
He was in that plane like a weasel into a chicken.
All right.
Over 2 years, Truett and her team captured scenes of the Arctic that had never been filmed before. And they had done it all by living life at the edge.
I think you can live up there with half your life and learn something every day.
There's nothing can actually compare with actually being there at the time.
I kind of miss it, and I think I would definitely go back.
The Arctic will stick with me forever. It's a place of harshness and power, and yet of incredible beauty. It inspires great respect and humility. You just can't help but come back changed.
We hope you have enjoyed this presentation from the National Geographic Video Library.